Well, today I want to catch you guys up on the sale on our house here in Denver, as well as take a look at some of the properties we're considering in Missouri.
The Wood Whisperer is sponsored by Type Bond.
So selling the house here in Denver was quite the experience. We busted our butts trying to get this house to be beautifully generic and trying to get it free of all the spag stank. And to make life easier, we decided to stay at my mom's condo for a few days just to clear out of the house and make it as easy as possible to do the showings. My mom's pretty particular about the cleanliness of her home. And in come the spags with 2 kids and 2 knucklehead dogs. It only took about an hour before Abby destroyed one of my mom's favorite plants and Dougie peed on the patio rug. So yeah, we all had a lot of fun. But we had numerous showings booked on Thursday and Friday, a couple on Saturday and Sunday, but we were under contract by Saturday. Now, I know the market is crazy just about everywhere, and people told me to expect this, but it was still a surprise. I was not expecting things to move that quickly. So obviously, we were all pretty relieved at the news. I celebrated with some ice cream. Abby watched. So things are looking pretty good on the Denver side of things, but you know, with real estate, it's not over until it's over. So now what's the deal with Missouri? Well, we had a few properties to look at. So we braved the airport and headed to the Midwest. I actually sent a joke text to my mom with this picture, and I captioned it, COVID tube. Aside from getting COVID, the trip was pretty nice. Ava got a donut, Mateo got to crap his pants while off-roading with his Uncle Jason, and we looked at properties. Now, obviously, when buying a property, the house is going to play a major role in this decision, but that's not really our focus here. I'm pretty much just going to focus on what I saw with regard to shop spaces. Of course, the search began at home. So we had a nice small list of places that we needed to see when we met with our realtor. So we're specifically looking for properties that not only have a home on the property, but also have a secondary building, ideally, or at least a place to put a building if we have to build. And there are a few key words that if you're searching for something like this, at least these are the ones I found to be helpful. Outbuilding, detached garage, second garage, shop, barn, and horse property. Now for the land itself, we're hoping for at least an acre. Back in Arizona, we lived on 3/4 of an acre, and I was able to build an 1,800 square foot shop with plenty of yard to spare. So anything over an acre should be good. So let's look at a few of actual properties that we toured while we were there, and I'll give you an idea where my head is at. First up is a beautiful home that was right on a shared lake. It's about 3 acres, and it has plenty of room for a shop, but looks can be deceiving. When we got there, the first thing I noticed was the slope. Shops can obviously be built on a slope, but it's a lot more work. But there were also issues that we had with the house. I'm not going into that at this point, but it kind of disqualified that property for us. Next up is a place that looked pretty darn promising at first glance. Looks like a nice large outbuilding, and the only thing that the listing said was large outbuilding. Well, I guess they weren't lying. Now, unfortunately, when we got there, it turned out that it was just a metal shed with a gravel floor and no power. So maybe a possible starting point for a shop, but definitely not what I'm looking for. Next up was a really beautiful home on 4 acres. I was interested in this one because it had a compelling garage space and the location was a lot closer to stuff like stores and restaurants and internet. It has 2 garages with climate control and a breezeway between them. And while I have no intention of actually having my permanent shop in a garage, there may be a situation where I have to temporarily work in a garage while another shop is being built on the property. So it's always good to allow for that possibility. So while the property actually has the room for a shop, there are 2 things working against us here. Again, I see a huge slope. You can't really see it in the picture, but there is a walkout basement and it's a pretty steep decline all the way through the back of the property. Second, and more importantly, it turns out that the house is located in a city that is very unlikely to allow us to build on the property. So disqualified. So let's take a second to talk about zoning. That's a really important thing. Just because there's land and there is space for a building doesn't actually mean that you can build. And while a lot of realtors will have some knowledge of zoning in particular areas, you never want to totally go by that. You have to do your own research. I recommend starting by taking the city or the county you're looking at and then search with the word zoning. You can often find a zoning and planning division, and then sometimes they have documents online where you can actually just peruse the rules and regulations regulations, and other times you just get to the point where you need to find a phone number. Make that phone call, talk to the right person, and start asking questions. I've done that a couple different times, and it turns out to be really useful. You give them the exact address, and they tell you what you can and can't do. Some questions you should probably ask. How many buildings can be on the property? Do the buildings need to be attached to the home? Can I run a business on this property? Can I hire employees? Can I have naked woodworker meetups? That would be a bad idea. Ultimately, the answers to these questions you do not want to receive after you buy a property. Now, we looked at quite a few other properties, but I had to dismiss them based on house reasons or location reasons, which don't really pertain to this video. Now, I actually have two more to show you, and both of them happen to be horse properties. Well, good thing I've got a lot of experience with horses. Now, the first one is a 4-acre property with an absolutely gorgeous oasis for horses. And look at this barn. It's fully insulated and so much bigger than anything I could have ever imagined. The ceilings are really high, which is actually a negative, but a small price to pay for something this substantial. For me, I would say anywhere between a 10 and a 12-foot ceiling is kind of ideal. Anything taller than that, like RV garages with 16-foot ceilings, it's just a lot of extra air to have to heat and cool, and it also makes it a little bit more difficult if I want to run things on the ceiling like dust collection. So for me, the ideal is going to be somewhere between a 10 and a 12-foot ceiling. Now, I did some poking around in there and found two 200 amp sub panels, so there's going to be plenty of power in that barn. Unfortunately, this property has one fatal flaw. It's on a busy highway. Between having small kids and the additional road noise, it just wasn't right for us. But could we overlook that for the sake of such an amazing shop space? But the barn! The road, but the barn. Maybe. I mean, it depends on if we see something better or not. And the problem is, in this market, you just don't have the time to really think about these things. By the time you make a decision, someone else already made their decision and the house is under contract. Things are getting tense. By the way, there is one thing that I have to talk about, something that's on my mind when I see a property like this, and that's guilt. Someone put a lot of time and money into turning this place into an oasis for horses, and I'm just gonna come in there and wipe it out and make it a wood shop. Obviously, if I pay for the property, I could do what I want with it. I could turn the thing into a petting zoo with baby Cremonas running around all over the place if I wanted to. But I still feel like it would be a shame for that property to go to anyone but another horse lover. But ultimately, I'm not gonna let that stop me from making a decision I need to make. It's just something that's weighing on my mind. So I saved the best for last. This one is a 14-acre horse property. That's way bigger than we need, but it includes a standalone barn that's quite a nice distance from the house. Now, the barn is pretty huge. It's not quite the caliber of what we saw in the last barn, but still huge. And also, it's not quite as nice as the last one, but I'm not afraid to make improvements on an existing structure if the bones are good. Now, the front of the barn is currently being used as general utility and storage space. Back further, there's a few stalls and then a tack room. And a little further back, more stalls. And there's even a giant urinal. Just kidding. That's where they hose off their magnificent beasts. At least that's what I'm assuming. Now, it looks like the back portion of the barn is a newer add-on. The ceiling is insulated and the whole thing is just in much better shape than the front larger section. And while the floor is concrete all the way through, some of the stalls do appear to have horse mats, and I think it's just on dirt. Now, we did take a close look around the barn, and it looks like a lot of the roof panels and the side panels are probably due for replacement. In some areas, there's water penetration, though most of the wood seems to be in pretty good shape, so it's not too far gone, but there are definitely a few pieces that look like they're due for replacement as well. And of course, just being a simple barn, that rafter spacing looks to be about 8 feet, and of course, if we wanted to have, some kind of a ceiling in this space, we'd probably need to beef that up to some extent. Oh, and I should mention that I did sneak behind some hay, and I found a sub panel. Looks like it is a 200 amp service, so plenty of power for anything I would need to do. Now, while the barn itself has some possibilities to use it as a workspace, the property certainly has plenty of room for a completely new building. And my gut tells me that by the time we renovate and improve and get the barn up to the standard that I would need it for my shop, we may have just been better off going with a totally new build, maybe spending a little bit more, but having everything be brand new. I don't know, I'm gonna have to talk to a contractor, but it's kind of what my head is telling me at this point. Now, the way I could see this going down is with a barn in place and power there, I could easily run some circuits for some new lighting, as well as all the tools that I need to run, and kind of have a temporary workspace to work in while a new shop space is being built. As long as I don't mind the humidity. and the temperature, and the bugs. So many bugs. So we liked what we saw. This was the most promising property we saw on our trip, and we decided to put in an offer. The only problem was there was already an offer in on the property, but they were accepting backups. So we submitted our best offer, and it was accepted as a backup. Now I'll tell you, the only good thing about getting COVID was it was after we put in that offer, and instead of sitting around wondering what was going to happen with this real estate transaction, I had bigger fish to fry, like getting better. So I was able to drive home and isolate in my basement, and I lived on a steady diet of Seinfeld, Gatorade, and vitamins. Now, while I was isolating in the basement, Nicole and my mom were getting the house ready for staging, and thankfully we got the phone call. Turns out the first offer fell through, and we were pushed up as the primary, and we were officially under contract for the new property. So we put our house on the market officially. You know how that ended. We already talked about that. And now it was just a matter of waiting. Now, during my downtime, I actually did enough research ahead of time that I was confident we can do what we wanted to do with the business and with the new shop. But I decided to go a little bit deeper, and I did make a phone call to the county, talked with the person in charge, gave them the address, and really grilled them with all of those questions that I mentioned before. So it turns out I could put as many buildings as I want on the property, which is kind of interesting. They just can't be dwellings. You can't have people live there. We also can run a business on the property, and we can, if we want to, start a boarding business, which is kind of neat. I don't know that we're going to do it, but it's a neat possibility, especially considering I do feel bad taking this stuff that was made for horses and turning it into a wood shop. Well, it's kind of a neat possibility to have a side business boarding horses. The wiggly eyes are wiggling. We'll see. That's something I got to research, but my daughter saw horses, and now she's looking at these horses, and as much as I try to convince her that Abby is a horse, and I'll even put a saddle on her if we have to, she doesn't believe me, but I tend to disagree based on what I have to clean up in the backyard. So everything is going our way, right? Just have to finish out the school year and give it some time, and I'm a cowboy, baby. Or maybe not.
Hey Mark, what's this?
Yep, while searching for internet options at that address, of all things, Nicole came across an auction website that listed the house as a foreclosure, the house we currently have a contract on. Obviously, we immediately contacted our real estate agent, and we are currently trying to figure out what is going on and what we can do about it. Now, I've never ended this show on a cliffhanger. Why would I? But I don't know anything more at this point. You guys know as much as I do. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll find some resolution to this pretty soon. Thanks for watching. Baby Cremonas.